Hello there guys. It is summertime and summertime means air shows and air shows means Red Arrows, at least it does here in the UK. I've been thinking of doing a Red Arrows display for a while. I'm not going to do all 9 aircraft, but I did manage to get 2 of this kit pretty cheap on eBay. I think it was less than £10 for 2 of them. This is the Airfix 1/72 scale, slightly older tooling. This is a 2008 tooling. And then I also found one of these, which is their more recent 2020 tooling, which is their gift set / starter set. So I guess this video will serve partly as a build video and partly as a comparison between the older tooling and the newer starter set. One thing I didn't really notice when I ordered them, but I did when they arrived, is the different decals that these kits have. So the starter set has the Union flag, or half the Union flag, on the tail fin, whereas the older set simply has the red, white and blue stripes. That's not going to be a major problem, but it's worth noting. The older set, and you can just about see it there, has the white triangle on the underside of the wings as well. The starter set doesn't have that, although the Red Arrows livery this season does have that white triangle on. I took this photo about a month ago. Looking at the kits, it should be fairly easy to tell the difference when I'm building them. The older tooling, the 2008 tooling, is this grey plastic. As you can see, there's still a good amount of detail there. Lots of panel lines and hatches and things like this. And quite a simple parts breakdown as well. While the starter set has this red plastic, I thought this was the aircraft at first, but this is just the stand that they come with. I'll show you more of that later. I guess the red plastic is designed so that if you don't want to paint it, you don't have to, and also so that the supplied paints take better. As you can see, the shape is very similar. We've got the console between the front and rear seats moulded into the fuselage halves, whereas it's a separate piece on the 2008 tooling, but otherwise, at this stage, fairly similar. So let's get on to the build. Starting with the cockpit. This is probably the area where the difference between the two kits is most noticeable. It's not so much the detail in the plastic itself, more that the older kit has an instrument panel and it has decals for the side consoles on the instrument panel as well. On the starter set we simply get the base, the floor, and we get the seats that go in there. No controls, no joysticks, no instrument panels. As always with aircraft kits, I feel it's easier to put the cockpit into one half of the fuselage first, glue it into position, and then get the painting done. Both kits have features to help you get the fuselage and the wings aligned. On the 2008 kit we have the tabs on the upper wing which slot into the fuselage half. A nice feature of the starter kit is these holes, which are used to align the top and bottom halves of the wings. You'll also notice there's some detail moulded in there, which is added separately on the older tooling. It's great to see that both kits make it easy to have the undercarriage up, and of course that's quite a likely scenario for a Red Arrows model. And I'm glad to say that both kits provide a pilot. In fact, the starter set provides 2. In the starter set, this single piece is used to blank off those undercarriage doors to make them closed, whereas they're separate and slightly more fiddly in the 2008 tooling. Here I'm adding that detail which was moulded into the starter set by default. Here you can see a comparison of the two. One thing that is noticeable is that there are these holes on the starter set wing on the underside which were for the undercarriage doors, and if you have the undercarriage up, those holes are kind of left over. The seats in both kits look to be the exact same moulding, the exact same model. And here you can see with the instrument decal and that sidewall detail and the control columns, the older kit just looks a bit better in terms of the cockpit. I know often a lot of this won't be seen, but the Hawk does have a particularly large canopy, I think, so there will be quite a lot visible. One other difference between the kits is the inclusion of this centerline drop tank on the 2008 tooling. I believe this is where the dye is stored for the coloured smoke that the Red Arrows produce, so it's a bit of a shame that it's not included in the starter set. With both kits it was really easy to get the tail fins in the right position at the right angle. They've both got tabs that do a great job of keeping them at the right angle. Now next up was painting, and with a red top coat, and a particularly bright red top coat, grey primer is not going to do the job, so I went for my white Tamiya primer. That did struggle to cover the red plastic of the starter set, and I did have significantly more trouble with the older kit in terms of seam lines and sanding and things like this compared to the starter set. In terms of painting, I airbrushed Tamiya X7, which is their gloss red, and I think it's done a fairly good job there. It looks slightly washed out on the camera, but it's much brighter in real life. I was really pleased with the initial finish of these. The Tamiya gloss paint goes down very well, and in fact removed the need for a gloss coat before the decals. The decal sheets are very different both in terms of the number of decals and the breakdown of them. So you can see on the 2008 kit, for example, that the red for the roundels is a separate decal to the white and the blue, and the white stripe followed by the Royal Air Force and then the other part of the white stripe is one big decal on the older kit. We can also see that on the older kit we have a variety of serial numbers to choose from, plus those white decals for that underside triangle that I'm not going to use. The newer kit's decals are much smaller, as would befit a starter set. We've only got a single option for the serial number. Curiously, the white stripe and the Royal Air Force are two separate decals, so some alignment there will be required. I suppose still that's perhaps easier than putting down one huge decal and risking it folding up on itself. Then we've got the quite clever design for the Union Jack, which goes over the red of the tail to make the correct colours and the correct pattern. There were no problems at all with the starter set decals, and very quickly I had a Union flag on the tail, and then the rest of the decals down. The decals in the older tooling are slightly lower quality, I find. The white really struggled to cover up the red, particularly on that stripe on the side, and the red for the roundels was quite noticeably different between the different roundels which were included on the sheet. Some of them were quite high saturation, some of them looked quite faded, even though they were supposed to be the same colour. Nevertheless, I got them down, and I really felt that the aircraft were coming to life at this stage. There were a few touch-ups needed for the cockpit using Vallejo model colour. Then for the 2008 tooling, that centre console goes into place. The ejector seats can go in. Then it was a case of masking the canopy with some Tamiya masking tape and painting the framing a gloss red. Here the starter set has a single canopy piece, so it's closed all the time, whereas the 2008 tooling has a separate front and rear piece. We also get the moulding here for the deck cord in the canopy on the 2008 tooling. Unfortunately, I did notice that the canopy fit was not very good on the 2008 tooling. And in particular, if we look at this shot here for the front section, I can try and get it in focus, you can see when it's aligned on one side of the cockpit, it's a good couple of millimetres too wide on the other side. So there I am going to need to perhaps glue one side or sort of pin it in place somehow while I glue it, which will be interesting. With that in mind, I put a little bit of detail on the pilots. The 2008 pilot has arms which are positionable, so you can make them look a little bit like they're holding the control column, whereas the gift set pilot here in red is quite chilled and has just got his hands on his lap, like flying close formation is nothing to him. There are a few different reference images for the uniforms, but essentially it is the red overalls below and a green flight suit on top, which really only leaves the arms in red. And with that done, my 3 red arrows were complete. Here is the gift set on the stand that they provide. And this stand was also really helpful when I was putting decals on and things like that, because it holds the kit in front of you. The older kits don't quite fit on this stand because there's no internal plug for them, so they kind of droop a little bit without some blue tack in there. So what did I think of those 2 kits? Well, not surprisingly, there wasn't a huge amount to choose between them. Probably the biggest difference is the cockpit detail in the 2008 tooling, which is really basic in the starter set. The older tooling does have more surface detail as well, although I'm not necessarily sure that's a good thing. At this scale, I feel like I like the smoother lines of the 2020 set compared to the older tooling with more panel lines and access hatches and things like that. The 2008 tooling also gives us a choice of serial numbers on the decal sheet. However, the 2020 starter set gives us much better decals overall. The colours are better and the white is much stronger. And of course it's the more recent decal scheme with the Union Jack on the tail. And the big winner, I think, is the inclusion of the stand in that starter set, especially for a kit like this, which is quite likely to be displayed in a flying position. I'm going to leave my red arrows here for today, but I am going to do some kind of display with them. Most likely that will involve some cotton wool and some red, white and blue paint to represent the smoke. I haven't quite decided what formation to go in yet. I could go in a sort of subset of this formation here, maybe 3 aircraft lying astern, each for a different colour smoke, but that's a bit sort of predictable, isn't it? I was thinking of something like this, perhaps a central aircraft with some white smoke, and then 2 more aircraft spiralling around, one with red, one with blue smoke. Of course, the challenge for all of those, and particularly the spiral one, will be getting those aircraft suspended in that way. I can use some kind of wire perhaps, or some clear acrylic inside the cotton wool, but I just need to work on that and how I'm going to do it. Wire, of course, is much more malleable. Acrylic rod tends to be straight and bending it tends to be quite difficult. But we'll see. If you've got any ideas, then please do leave a comment below. Anyway, that's all for this week's video. I would like to say thank you to all of you for watching, and extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. I really greatly appreciate all of the support that you guys give me, and I honestly do read every single comment that you leave, so thank you very much for those. It is of course summertime and I'm doing a bit more travelling at the moment, but I am of course trying to keep some videos coming your way. So until the next one, thank you again for watching and have fun modelling.